As Congressman Mike Haridopolos' federal district includes Brevard and Indian River, as well as parts of Orange County. He explains why he says proof of citizenship is necessary and elaborates on his concerns about non citizens voting. So, the Save America Act is based on restoring voter integrity. Help me understand what has compromised that integrity.
Well, I think in general that, as you probably know, 14 states currently do not even require an identification in order to vote. And as you probably know, also, when you actually get a driver's license, that also does not let people know if you're an American citizen or not, though the Real ID Act is slowly moving in that direction. I think that given the concerns that Democrats had about the 2016 election, when you had people like McGovern, Pelosi, Raskin, Jeffries, Maxine Waters, all calling President Trump an illegitimate president. And then in 2020, of course, the controversies that followed there as well. One great way to restore some trust back in our elections so that a lot of these voices are silenced is to give people the confidence to know that when you go to vote, that just like before you get on an airplane, that you have a scenario where people will show their ID so that they do not vote in either multiple sites or at least verifying that they have the proper identification and showing that they are an American citizen, which has come into question given the fact that 10 million people approximately entered the country illegally between 2021 and 2024.
Just to clarify, real quick, you mentioned controversy of 2020 elections. What are you referring to?
Well, as we all know, there was a lot of controversy about 2016. There's a lot of tape that, whether it be Hillary Clinton or others, talked about the illegitimacy of Trump and how the elections have been influenced. And then, of course, the controversies after the 2020 elections, which culminated in that horrible situation on January 6th. And so I think what we need to do as members of Congress is to create some common sense ideas like voter ID, which again does not exist in 14 states, and try to put that forward, and also to make sure that when people are registered to vote, that they are actual American citizens. I talked to my own supervisor of elections who, when they went through their voter rolls, there were many people that are found to be not American citizens, and they were, of course, removed from the voter rolls.
Let me expand on that. What evidence is there that undocumented residents are voting?
Well, one simple evidence is the idea that I talked to my supervisor of elections, and when he went through the rolls, he found people who admitted that they were not American citizens and who had voted, and they were turned into the local election authorities. And whether it be one or 1,000 or 10,000 or 10 million, every vote should be one person, one vote. And to build on that same idea, we had a recent election in West Melbourne where their election was literally decided by one vote. But I think it's vital that what we'd want to do is instill confidence in our election systems. And as you probably know, there are some states that give people who are not American citizens driver's licenses. And so all we're trying to do is make sure that in an American election, that American only vote and they decide the future of America. And then, of course, the elected representatives and senators, will, let alone state representatives and state senators and governors, can govern accordingly.
Let me ask you how the Save America Act would impact people who don't have easy access to the original citizenship documents. I'm looking at research by the Brennan Center in 2024, found 21.3 million Americans do not have ready access to passport or birth certificate. That's more than 9% of voting age Americans.
Well, first of all, the Brennan group, they might call themselves bipartisan. I've been on television shows with them before. They're a very left-wing organization. I think that's one thing you might want to check a little closer. But that said, I think that if you want to board a plane, you need a driver's license and an ID. And because the new real ID standards as well. And if you know, when a person gets married, they go through this process with a name change. And I find it incredibly insulting when they start saying that minorities don't have the ability to go in and get a driver's license, et cetera. It's almost racist what some of the language they're using. I'm not sure where the Brennan group gets their information, but when the changes were instituted in the state of Georgia, that tried to tighten up the voter rolls, you actually saw a larger turnout the next election cycle. If people want to vote, it's not a difficult process. It's the reason why I sat down with my supervisor of elections and asked, how hard is it to register? And it's a very simple process. And if there's any discrepancies, if there is a person who came to vote and there's some question whether they were legitimately elector or not, there's actually a provisional ballots that's cast so that some would not be that denied that they can go through the process, et cetera. And so there are many safeguards in place, but I'm shocked that there are 14 states that don't require photo identification include in order to do this. And that's, to me, is very bizarre. I mean, if we have standards to get on an airplane or get on for that matter, buy alcohol or open a bank account or drive or check into a hotel, you got to show your identification. And for that matter, when I go to vote on the floor of Congress, I've got to show my photo ID and stick it in a machine and vote. And so it's just a common sense way to prevent fraud. And as you know, when sometimes you send out live ballots, which some states did during COVID and other states do regardless, that if that the person's no longer living there, it can easily be put into the system, which again would undercut the simple idea, as you know, one person, one vote.
Representative, you mentioned married women. I hear a lot from critics that married women whose legal ID name doesn't match their birth certificates could be disenfranchised. How would this impact those who legally changed their name?
Well, again, I've talked to a lot of women across the community. When they got married, they went in to the supervisor elections and changed it to their new legal name. And with the verification checks that are readily available in all supervisors' office, um, it's easily done. If there's any confusion about it, they offer them many alternatives in which to make sure that those measures are protected, so you don't lose that ability to vote. It's as you probably know when you talk to most people, when they do get married, they have a name change. They go into the supervisor elections office and make those changes. And if they had a real ID, which is of course in case when they can check citizenship in most cases, it's easily verified. And if there's any questions about it, there's more than enough time to clear those up.
Bill has passed the House, currently in the Senate. Where's your confidence that it will actually pass?
I don't know if it will pass or not. The Democrats seem pretty dug in that they don't think that voter ID is necessary. I happen to disagree. Again, if I don't know why anyone would say why deny voter identification unless you're trying to do nefarious things. And I'm not alone in my opinion, as you probably have seen the opinion polls. At least 75% of all voters believe that there should be voter identification before you go and cast your vote. Of course, among Republicans, the high number is much higher. And again, what's been shocking in some of the language that's been used that somehow if you're a married woman, you can't figure out how to make these adjustments, or if you're an African American or Hispanic or other minority group that you can't figure it out. It's to me almost racial insult that they can't figure it out.
What's your response to talk of nationalizing the midterm elections in select states?
Well, I don't know what I mean by nationalizing election. I mean, again, the Congress has long had a role in setting up standards. As I mentioned, back in the 1845, they established November elections for Congress. In the 1960s, they established, of course, Voting Rights Act. And the 1980s, making sure that handicapped citizens had access to vote. And that's not even counting, of course, the Congress's role in a constitutional amendment, where it'd be the 15th, the 19th, the 24th, the 26th amendments all had a congressional role. So I don't think it's nationalizing an election. What I do think is that historically you've set up basic safeguards and standards so that people have confidence in elections.
That was U.S. Congressman, Republican Representative Mike Haridopolos.